Published 2001 EDT, the 7th of October 2017. Updated 2006 EDT, the 7th of October 2017. Brexit Secretary David Davis wanted Theresa May to sack Boris Johnson for his Eve of Tory conference. Brexit revolt. It emerged last night. Brexit Secretary David Davis wanted Theresa May to sack Boris Johnson for his Eve of Tory conference. Brexit revolt. It emerged last night. The Mail on Sunday has established that Mr. Davis made it known to senior party figures that he believed the Foreign Secretary should be fired for setting out his red lines on Brexit in a newspaper article, and then again in a pre-conference interview. Mrs. May refused to do so on the grounds that it could backfire by causing an even bigger Conservative split. The disclosure that Mr. Davis wanted his fellow Brexiteer kicked out of the cabinet came as some observers expressed surprise at Mr. Davis partying at last week's conference. According to well-placed sources, he was high-spirited at a number of events. Mr. David attended a reception held by the party's powerful 1922 committee on Sunday evening. One source said Davis looked as if he had enjoyed a good dinner. He was throwing his arms around, with his entourage trailing in his wake. Number 10 was then irritated by remarks which Mr. Davis made to journalists the following day, during which he said he planned to retire in 2019 and leave Mr. Johnson to steer the UK through the Brexit transitional period. Mrs. May laughed off his barroom comments as a joke on Tuesday. But outgoing Mr. Davis was not finished with his conference socializing. Later that evening, he downed bubbly at the Spectator magazine's party in the Midland Hotel, alongside fellow cabinet ministers, newspapers editors and diplomats. The disclosure that Mr. Davis wanted his fellow Brexiteer kicked out of the cabinet came as some observers expressed surprise at Mr. Davis partying at last week's conference. A friend of Mr. Davis said David enjoys socializing. For anyone to criticize that is pathetic. It's not as if he is like Juncker, a reference to the famously bibulous European Commission chief. There is no suggestion Mr. Davis drank excessively. Earlier this year, Mr. Davis apologized after private text messages emerged in which he insulted Diane Abbott following a late-night encounter between the pair in a Commons bar. A spokesman for Mr. Davis said that the Boris claim was tittle-tattle and there was no suggestion that he had overindulged during the conference.